I think I want to ask you both, like what you are seeing in terms of water, wastewater, utilities project flow as a result of the infrastructure funding, or not.
Okay.
Maybe Peter, like more specifically to the district, and Tim, like at Parsons generally.
Yep, no, that's fine. That's a fair question. There's many different facets to what people see that, right? Like I see it from the contractor side, like opportunities, yeah, but yeah, yeah, yeah. I can handle that question.
Were you on any of the main stage sessions this morning?
No, I've been slammed all day. So
yeah, through work. So they did a poll, and they were asking like one of the questions was around. I'll get it up here. Thought it was pretty interesting because it's kind of like what we're seeing, which is what are the challenges? Like, why wouldn't you go after this funding and things like that. Go to my drafts. And this is the big one that I suspected, which is what organizational challenges do you foresee as a result of increased funding for infrastructure? And the number one thing was more workload with the same internal resources.
well, I mean, there's stats I have on this where it's like based on the Great Resignation and a number of other factors, procurement staffs are down 50 to 75% of what they were at their height. So you double the funding with half the people. Imagine what your lead times are now.
Yeah,
just is what it is.
Right. Yeah. Well, even when you had all those people, right? It's still, to establish the project, get the the funding coordinated for that project, getting the staff you have to do the application, whether it's state revolving fund or other grants and programs. That's extra work on top of the regular jobs. So that's definitely not surprised to see that as a big challenge. Hi, Denora. Glad to see you got in okay.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
So I did prepare this or they gave me like an opening slide deck, which has our information on there. And then I'm going to kick things off with just because in attending the sessions earlier today, it was very macro, very high level, nothing specific for utilities. So I'm going to go through in just maybe 5 minutes at the most, talk a little bit about the difference between ARPA and the infrastructure law, and the funding available, example projects under ARPA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And then we'll kick off the panel. So we'll see how many people join, and we'll see, I'll monitor the chat for questions that come in addition to the ones I've prepared. Did anybody have any other good questions they can think of for me to ask? Are you good with what I've prepared?
I'm fine with them.
I'm fine with them.
Okay. We lost your camera, Tim, unless that's by design.
I hope not. Hang on.
So while you're doing that, make sure your phones are on mute, which I'm doing right now on mine. I'll put it on vibrate in case somebody's like, Bob, your camera came off. And if you do have any, I have a dog and he doesn't really bark, but sometimes you can't help if your dog's barking, UPS or Amazon shows up or whatever. So you can see the controls right at the bottom of the screen there. You have closed caption, your camera, your mute button, and then the computer's monitor is to present your screen. You don't need to click on that. And then the settings, which should, if you have any issues with audio or the camera, you can click on settings. There you are. Now we see you, Tim. And Peter, you saw I added your additional duty at the Southern Nevada Water Authority on here. Is that okay?
Perfect. That's great.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't think that was you in there. that original photo, I was like, wait a second. And then I went to your LinkedIn profile just to see if you had a photo there. And
Okay.
you don't have a photo there. So I was like, all right.
Oh, shoot, that's where I just grabbed mine. So I have to make sure it's visible.
I wonder if it came off for some reason.
Maybe I deleted it. I'll go back and look at it. We'll see. I get in there once every 6 months, so it's not like it's something I do regularly.
What does this moderation thing mean? Moderation. No requests yet. Okay. I think we're good. And Lindsay Kelly told me that people won't be able to get in until right at the start of this thing. So we'll see if that holds true. So we'll just wait till that happens. And we'll give people a few seconds just to get acquainted, and then I'll go ahead and kick it off. Oh, Tim, we lost your camera again.
Yeah, this is just kind of weird. I've been having trouble for the last 48 hours with our network and VPN connection.
Oh, okay.
So it's been sporadic, make upgrades, it happens.
I think for the intros, I'll go ahead and Peter, I'll start with you. We'll just do it from the top down.
Okay.
And just, kick it off with you, Peter. Yauk, Director of Engineering from Las Vegas Valley Water District and Southern Nevada Water Authority. Peter, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then
Okay.
you can go in and blah, blah, blah. Same with you, Tim and Denora. So that's how I'll do it. So it'd be good for I think people participating to get an understanding of what your roles and responsibilities are at your organization. Denora, did you go to any of the sessions this morning?
I went to, I think I caught the last bit of the funding one, but I saw the digital transformation and then the how to get started right before this.
Yeah, did you catch the DJ?
I did, and I didn't realize his name was DJ Schematics. I guess I was thinking I was pronounced a different way, and then I was like, "Wow, this is really good. Who got the DJ?" That's
how appropriate. I think he's been used before by Trimble, but I've not seen it before. I wonder if I can pull up appropriately the questions.
One of the questions when they were talking about the digital transformation, I'm not sure if did you go to that one, Bob, or anyone?
Which one was it?
That's with Ed and
oh
Brian
yeah,
and
yep,
Minot.
Part of it.
So at the end, they asked the question of how like a lot of it was more towards roads and bridges or DOTs, yep. Right? And so I was like, it's interesting. I wonder if we'll get any of those questions from utilities, right? In this, how much of that applies to it? Because obviously all of it does, but any specifics on that?
We'll see. Usually with these things, we'll get one or two that ask a lot of questions and nobody else asks anything.
Spent a lot of time with attorneys lately on some things, so my stock answer or their stock answer is it depends. So if I start using that answer, you'll know I've turned my brain off.
That's what it is. This stuff is not black and white.
Yes.
You bring as many expertise on the experts on the team, and you eventually get to where you need to go, but it isn't black and white, especially when you're dealing with attorneys. It's many shades of gray.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really good at governing law.
It's nice to know you have a fallback career choice should you want to take advantage of it.
Well, I manage some of our partners and alliances, and so I'm just getting used to it, dealing with with lawyers from both sides, Trimble and our partners.
Okay.
All right, 4 minutes. And when I go through the slides, feel free to chime in or add anything at the end related to what I covered or anything else you want to add. This should be free-flowing, interactive between us and any participants in the audience.
Okay.
And Denora, you could talk to Cityworks now being a part of the owner government group within Trimble, if you want.
Yeah, the owner and public sector.
Owner and public sector. Yeah. Is that owner term commonly used? Is it new? It's something I'm just not as familiar with.
Honestly, I hadn't heard of it until I talked to like Quadri people and Trimble construction people who really use that term a lot.
It's like back in the day when we were inventing sectors of the market, like mobile resource management, field service management, the whole DER. It's like, who could create the newest market segment? All right, a couple more minutes. And it looks like the session is being recorded.
Okay.
Peter, do you guys use eBuilder for project management work?
Yes, we do.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we finished the implementation last year, around September-ish, and we've been just doing the maintaining it. we hired a consultant to help us with the implementation, and we extended their contract to kind of help with the startup and setting up all of our dashboards and some QC and rolling in all of our project history data.
Yeah. That's common. Cityworks does the same thing, the organization that Denora's from.
Okay.
Yep. They actually have a number of partners that they work with that do the implementation component of getting the software installed and integrated with other systems, getting the data in there.
Yeah. So this was our, I think, third year of using it as part of our capital budget processes. So, and this, it's really helped us as an organization to see the full picture of what's planned, what we want to get done in the cash flowing of the work. So it's been great.
Are you using it at all for, this is kind of like how the panel would go. Are you using, and I'll ask you this, tell us a little bit about using eBuilder. Are you using it for compliance reporting, audit, response, grant administration?
Yeah, mostly audit response and compliance. One of the things with working with our finance group is this platform has allowed us to be a lot more aligned with the reporting requirements they have for their GASB stuff. So it's been a big help for us to dig into questions and make sure that we're being compliant with all the financial requirements.
All right.
Oh, I think we're live.
Yeah, we are. I'm going to go ahead and kick the session off. Thank you all for joining. You'll note that there is a Q&A box of like the other sessions, the main sessions that you may have attended. If you want to ask a question at any point during this panel discussion, please enter it in the Q&A box in the dialogue box next to you on the right-hand side of your screen. So I'll go ahead and kick off the session here. My name is Bob Stern. I'm a Director of Strategic Initiatives at Trimble Utilities. One of my main responsibilities is to understand all the infrastructure funding that's out there and how it applies for utilities, and making sure that the Trimble Utilities business and our software offerings and other services are aligned with what we see in funding and how we can help our customers get funding. And joining us today on our panel is Peter Yauk. Peter, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure, thanks, Bob. I'm Peter Yauk, Director of Engineering for the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. And my primary responsibility is to implement the capital improvement plan, all the major capital construction projects for the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the major capital construction program for SNWA. So I design, construct, and turn over all of our capital programs to our operators. And roughly we're around about $4 billion, I think, in planned projects over the next 10 years right now. I worked at the Water Authority and Water District for just about 25 years now in various roles. And I've been in the Director of Engineering for the past 6 years.
Thanks, Peter. Also joining us today is Tim LaChapelle. Tim, a little bit about yourself and what you do at Parsons.
Hey, thanks, Bob. Hey, my name is Tim LaChapelle. I am the Chief Digital Officer at Parsons. I run an organization called Parsons X, which specializes in the really digital transformation and delivery of outcomes for our customers. Really pushing the envelope with digital twins, asset lifecycle management, and working to try and find new and innovative solutions for a lot of our customers. Parsons is a $4 billion company. I've been with them for 12 years in many different parts of the segment, from the federal side with cybersecurity, we're working out with the intelligence community, to the critical infrastructure side of the business. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Tim. And also joining us today is Denora Sanchez from our Cityworks organization. Denora, a little bit about yourself and your roles and responsibilities.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So I'm the asset management subject matter expert for Cityworks, and part of that also includes getting to work on some of the products, some of our risk analysis tools, and then some of areas that really go into projects, contract administration, or contract management and budgeting. I've been with Cityworks for just about 5 years. And prior to that, I was in local government here in the Houston area, working on corporate-wide asset management programs, in addition to obviously more of a work management system too. But corporate asset management, talking about risk analysis and having a way to compare apples to apples across the organization.
Thanks, Denora. Okay, I'm going to just take a few minutes and kind of drill down into the infrastructure funding that's become available with some more details on how it applies to utilities. It's a little bit different than what you may have heard or learned this morning in the main stage sessions. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so really this does represent a once in a lifetime opportunity for us. With funding made available through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, used to be called the IIJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's billions of funding that's been made available specifically for water infrastructure projects, in addition to power utilities, transmission utilities, roads, bridges, ports, and airports, and more. And if we're going to take a look at the difference between the two funding mechanisms. So ARPA was signed in March of last year. That provided $350 billion in COVID relief funds. And it does specify that money within ARPA can be used for necessary investments in water and sewer infrastructure. That money's been made available from the U.S. Treasury and deposited into the bank accounts of state and local governments. The allocation varies, but it's a lot of funding that's been made available through 2026. On the other hand, and what we've heard a lot in the news lately about, is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was signed by the president back in November. And that's the big $1.2 trillion infrastructure funding mechanism. And that does deliver $55 billion for water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. Primarily, the bulk of that funding is being made available through state SRF programs, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And the EPA and other agencies, EPA on the water, DOE on the power, as well as other organizations, received the funding and are managing the disbursement of the funding, the reauthorizations of the state revolving funds, and other programs that were authorized under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And just, some quick things about ARPA funding. So I mentioned that the funding has flowed to the state and local governments. They've gotten both disbursements or tranches of funds already, and many are in the process of determining the programs and projects that they're going to fund under ARPA. Some are ahead of others in terms of the disbursement of funds and have projects rolling already, and some are still going through the process of determining the best use of those funds and how to spend them. And again, water and sewer infrastructure projects can qualify for funding under ARPA. There's a couple examples of some projects that received funding under ARPA. This is a $40 million sewer and water infrastructure project in Buffalo, and a $56 million sewer and water project in East Baton Rouge Parish in Louisiana. So you can see that, as I mentioned, some have already identified projects that's receiving these funds, and they're going through the process of getting these projects going already. One thing about ARPA that's important to mention is that you have to allocate the funds by the end of 2024, and the projects of which those funds were dispersed to need to be completed by the end of 2026. So time is of the essence here. And I'll show you a couple of ways to identify some of those funding opportunities. And then if you look and peel back the onion on the bipartisan infrastructure law a bit, that's $55 billion for water infrastructure that's been made available. And then you go through the various funding buckets, and you see a majority of the funding here has been made available through the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. So if you're familiar with applying for funds under the state revolving funds in your state, the programs have been reauthorized and funding's been reauthorized for those programs with $15 billion in new funding for lead service line replacement and other projects. And as I mentioned, a lot of the funding through the state revolving funds goes to each state. Each state has their own organization that they've developed to disperse the funds and manage the revolving fund programs in those states, and they manage both drinking water and clean water revolving funds. So go to your state revolving fund websites. They go by different names depending on which state you're coming from. But if you Google the state and name and the revolving fund, it'll probably come up at the top of the list of your search results. And then once you're in there, if you really want to see what the priorities are, in addition to what the federal government has issued in terms of parameters of the funding through the EPA and other guidance, go to the state revolving fund intended use plan. Every state has one. They're at various different stages of review and approval. Some already have projects listed that have been invited to apply for the funds that have been prioritized in there. A lot of it to disadvantaged communities and other areas of need. And but if you go in there, it gives you a lot of good information about what's likely to be funded and what are priorities, and that should help you in terms of guidance on what projects you may want to develop that could qualify for funding. There are other programs available for funding out there. The WIFIA, Water Infrastructure Finance Innovation Act, and the USDA, FEMA, HUD, and other state programs are available. All fund various different types of projects and programs for water, wastewater, and stormwater organizations that are out there. And then on the Trimble side, just reinforcing some of the information you've already heard around a number of solutions from Trimble that address the design, build, operate, and maintain. I'm sure you've learned a lot about those. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of that real quickly. But we also do that in partnership with our partners like Parsons and others out there. So be sure to let us know if you have any questions about the information we're sharing today and about our partners. And then specifically around utilities and intelligent infrastructure and asset management solutions, we have a number of solutions that address workflows across water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. Trimble Unity, a mobile work management solution. We have remote monitoring solution where we develop and manufacture remote monitoring devices measuring and monitoring pressure, flow, and more. And eBuilder, which many of you know about for program and project management and capital improvement programs. Cityworks Asset Management for permitting, licensing, land, and inventory. And many of you are also familiar with a number of Trimble handhelds and survey and mapping equipment that we sell through our dealers across the country and other partners. So that's a little bit about infrastructure funding. Again, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A dialog box on the right hand of your screen, and we'll be sure to get them to the panel. All right. Does anybody on the panel have anything to add on what I just covered regarding infrastructure funding that's out there? Okay. Yeah. Peter, do you have something?
I don't. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we start with you? I
Okay.
understand you do use eBuilder for your capital programs and management of those programs and projects. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're using eBuilder.
Sure. So we embarked on replacing an in-house project management system about 4 years ago, and we fully implemented eBuilder to manage all of our capital programs for both the Water District and the Water Authority. And we finished that work in September of last year. So essentially about $4 billion in capital improvements between the two agencies. And we utilize this to manage the design, the planning, design, and construction aspects of these projects and programs. A lot of the work we put into it was to integrate the funding sourcing and the cash flows with our finance group, so they could accurately project their financial models and outlooks in terms of looking at rate studies, looking at bond markets, looking to see what we need to do in terms of securing funds to meet the financial expectations based on the cash flows of the projects. So it's been a great tool for us as an organization to have essentially one location for all of our information on the capital programs for two agencies.
Thanks, Peter. And maybe Tim, a little bit about what Parsons provides in terms of solutions for water utilities looking to get funding and start projects and programs, maybe working with Parsons.
Sure. So a number of our customers are really interested. I mean, getting an increase of funding is like this is kind of haven't seen in a long time. It's generational. And so when folks have this opportunity, they want to make sure they look at their holistic operations, I believe. Like we have customers in Silicon Valley, we have customers over in Francisco with SFP, where what they're looking for is, hey, let's reimagine what we're looking at from our facility, right? How can we make it better, more easily maintainable with the money we've got, right? So we've been helping a lot of our customers with grant writing, really, honest, to kind of get started in getting some proof of concepts out, where I've been able to do things like digital twins, do some GIS location parts of their facilities, really help their O&M side of the house really get a good feel for where things are, how things are working, are they efficient or not, work on different kind of inspection regimens based on what we've seen from the data, really help the data kind of drive their operational excellence is really what we're seeing from our standpoint.
Cool, thanks, Tim. And Denoro, maybe some of the things Cityworks is doing regarding infrastructure funding and how Cityworks enterprise asset management solutions can help utilities with infrastructure funding and compliance and other challenges and needs.
Yeah, so one of the most exciting and rewarding things is getting to see how people who have been using Cityworks, users have been able to already reap that investment or that return on investment of being able to say, hey, I'm going to use this system that I have been logging all of my work history in, and having that inform them so that they know where are the areas that need to be focused, and then also informing the future projects. So we have people who have used information from Cityworks that they're storing in Cityworks to now inform them as to where can they spend ARPA, right, funding. And so being very targeted as to what projects need to occur in their communities. And so that right off the bat, first one, right, being able to identify where can I go out and spend to make sure that if there is failing infrastructure that I address it now, that I mitigate it in some fashion. And one other way that we have that also is we have something called Operational Insights, where we have clients in the Northeast and in the Great Lakes who are actually using tools like that to identify, where is there the biggest risk to any of their water lines, their sanitary sewer. So from a wastewater standpoint, being able to say, hey, if I'm under a consent decree, obviously there is documentation that's required. There is proof also to the feds, and I need to document all this, and I need to keep all that information in one location. And being able to put Cityworks into place to help them with all that work history. Obviously, the fundamental investment is really into GIS, right? Their system of record, and being able to log all information there associated with those assets, but then the work history is part of Cityworks. And with that, they can now start to look at where should I be focusing my lining in next time, right? Next fiscal year. And that starts to feed their future projects, their future capital expenditures. And so that is really the whole point of this, right? How can we facilitate not just compliance at a federal level, but even efficiencies and effectiveness, and being able to make sure that if a natural disaster is to occur, such as a snowstorm, hurricane, I'm here in Texas, so we get those quite a bit, being able to already have, standard operations of tracking what work's being done, but then have that documented going forward, all the costs associated with it, so that when any audit or any funding opportunities come into play, that's easily available.
Thank you for that. And just to mention a couple things related. So Trimble Utilities has complementary technologies that feed information to Cityworks and eBuilder and other solutions with our IoT remote monitoring devices that you can put on various parts of your water, wastewater infrastructure to monitor the performance of the system and prioritize where you want to start your projects, where the high areas of vulnerability and risk are, that can be used for the development and qualification of your projects for funding under both ARPA and the infrastructure law and the state revolving funds. Peter, going back to you, has your organization applied for any funding recently as a result of the passage of ARPA or the infrastructure law and or the state revolving fund programs?
Sure. Yeah, the answer is yes, we have. So we've got a list of projects we've submitted to the state for their review and prioritization. We, as two public as a water district, we serve the community of Las Vegas. Most of unincorporated Clark County is the city of Las Vegas, and so we have a large customer base. We also provide service. We're the operating and maintenance provider for some smaller outlying communities in the Las Vegas area. We've also applied for grants through the ARPA funding and through state revolving fund for those smaller communities. Generally, we're able to get more funding with these smaller isolated communities because they are a little bit more disadvantaged economically, and we tend to rely on those funding sources for their capital programs. Their community is small. Their customer base is small. They don't have a lot of money, and water infrastructure is expensive. So it's nice that if with this money is available through SRF funds, that we can then augment that and keep these communities going with the water supply and quality that they need.
Right, and maybe as a district, there's some nuances to getting funding. Some cases, districts have to go through other routes to get funding. Can you maybe explain a little bit about that in relation to ARPA and the infrastructure law, and what you might be doing as a district to navigate through that?
Yeah, so as a district, we're submitting again through the state, like you said, it goes through that point. We are a separate public entity, so there's some limitations, or we can get sponsorships through either Clark County with some of the funds that they've got, or the city of Las Vegas, the funds that they have as well. So we try to work with them in terms of our application process so that the money can be utilized.
Okay, and Tim, if I turn it over to you now, what are you seeing at Parsons in terms of water and wastewater utilities project flow related to maybe spike in infrastructure funding?
Yeah, so like from our standpoint, what we're seeing is a lot of our our water clients are looking for. I just seen a massive uptick on digital twins, just taking the data that the utilities own and have, and really trying to find ways again to create that digital replica so it's easy for them to maintain and easy to get really a good hand on their facilities. The second thing I'm seeing a lot of is with funding in this area is a lot of our project management information system integration work. Similar work to what we've done with Las Vegas and with other customers, like just really a lot of our customers are looking to find ways to kind of harness the power of data that's in their facility. They know there is a lot out there, right? And so there's a lot of, I wouldn't say call it digital transformation, but I would call it, digital leveraging operational day in and day out, right? And so when we've seen projects, it's either been, hey, I'd like to, look at trying to find a way to integrate these different data sets that they have with respect to how they manage their water assets, whether it's the facility, whether it's the flow, whether it's, output, whether it's capital expenditures. It's all in those areas where we're looking to see, we're looking for a lot of proof of concept work actually. There's, that they're trying to get ahead of the game, so to speak. Like I said, the fund, there's not a lot of funding. An influx of funding like this hasn't really happened in a long time. But the kind of the downside, and I've seen it, is with the Great Resignation, is that our procurement are kind of getting stretched. There's a lot of work that we're taking longer lead times. We're taking longer procurement cycles to kind of get some of these projects done. If funding is available, these grants have provided a very interesting and very quick way that some of our customers are getting access to these quick pilots. But the longer term project, the bigger projects, take a little longer to get through.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to the proof of concepts and pilots comments, I know that there is funding in both under the infrastructure law and the state revolving fund programs and ARPA available for proof of concept projects and pilots that can support a greater CIP program that the utility might have. So that's a great way to just substantiate, gather the facts, the data, and information for an eligible project under funding through both programs, and qualify for that funding and get the funding. Here's a question that came in for you, Denora. What are some of the value-added workflows to integrate between eBuilder and Cityworks? So maybe talk about that recent development in terms of the integration between both systems.
Sure. And I think it comes back to, if for any of the attendees, if they also went to or listened to the digital transformation session that was offered just a couple of hours ago, really the idea of how do we bring together everything from the owner, so the municipalities, the districts, the utilities, and their projects, how they manage those contracts, all the way to the stakeholders, bringing those key stakeholders in, notifying them of changes, having better communication, right? And that is key to just any workflow. And an example that was brought out was, like, for example, the RFI process. That was identified both with like what Minnesota DOT is doing, and then also what was done abroad. And so how that translates to what's being done with eBuilder and Cityworks is really looking at that. How do we facilitate that, right? How do we go from what eBuilder provides of managing those programs and those projects, but then actually going down into the operational level? And so what we mean by that is, for example, if you have in-house work that's going to be done and you want those costs captured and you want that in your work management system, you're going to turn to maybe your operations staff is more used to operating in Cityworks versus your engineers and some of your planners working in eBuilder. Well, there could be a disconnect because someone's really used to just their system, right? And so what we need to do, if there's an RFI change or a cost change that needs a commitment that needs to be reviewed, that integration needs to be provided so that that gets submitted in eBuilder, and that kicks off a work order in Cityworks. And so that's the type of work that we're doing right now, so that there's communication on both ends, that all the costs are captured. So once they're captured on the Cityworks side, that can be reported back and sent back to eBuilder, so that the engineering side of the house is aware of that. And that's really that whole digital transformation. When we really break down what that means in daily operations, it's one, communication and having everyone informed. And also it goes back to documentation and having that process just available regardless of which side of the house you're interacting with, whether it's eBuilder, Cityworks, or in this case, obviously Trimble products, but anything outside of that.
Okay, thanks for that. And then turning back to you, Peter. So maybe you could speak to digital transformation on your end at the district, and maybe the journey you have embarked on to adopt technology within your organization, how that has gone, and the benefits you're seeing from like solutions like eBuilder.
Sure. We've been fairly progressive on the digital world for quite some time in terms of our GIS layers and documenting that stuff. So we've been collecting GPS points of all our infrastructure that's been installed since I want to say about 2001. So we've got a really good database for all our existing infrastructure that's been constructed over the years. But again, it's been a little bit of a trial and error in terms of trying to go digital versus paperless. Paperless is an oxymoron. It seems like these days you go through these digital processes that kicks out some paper you got to sign anyway. But we've been using eBuilder and using those workflows and processes built in with that has helped streamline some of that work, so that at the end of the day, a lot of the internal approvals we have, all of our coordination with the contractors and our consultants is handled digitally through the eBuilder application. So we truly have been able to implement a lot more of our digital processes, all of our processes more digitally, and it's a lot more transportable. So a lot of these devices we have, whether it's an iPad, a laptop, or an iPhone, or your desktop, there's ways for the workflows to still be continued, even though you may not be in the office. I mean, that's been a godsend for us for the last couple of years with the pandemic, with people working remotely, but still being able to make sure that the workflows are happening, still checking on progress, still updating their information, and still getting the work done. So it's been a big help for us with that, along with the Microsoft products and other things we've been utilizing since then.
And I would imagine making compliance that much easier, since you have a lot of the regulatory required data at your fingertips.
That is true. Yes, it is a lot easier with that standpoint in terms of the reports we have to generate each month, as well as the follow-ups and the documentation that supports the grant requests that we do have to meet those monthly or quarterly reports that we have to turn in to validate that we're spending the money appropriately. Exactly. That's been a big help for that.
Right. And Tim, maybe just to transition to you, you could talk a little bit about how your experience in helping water utilities with digital transformation, adoption of digital technologies, and your experience in that.
Sorry, double muted there. Sorry. Yeah. So from our standpoint, it really becomes like an outcome. Like, what do you want to get? Like, I think Peter was talking about was an audit. I want to have a report. Like, I want to have these ways of like, hey, these are important things that matter to me, right? On operations side, like it's tech, but if I can't put it into play and make a meaningful impact to how I go about running my business and having data and handling customer concerns, use cases, it's pointless. I mean, it's just data. It is what it is. And so, like, a lot of our transformations that we're having them is, I kind of coin it as outcome as a service. There's the thing I need to get done, whatever that thing is, right? And that thing can be empowered by a number of different capabilities. For example, EMIS team uses eBuilder day in and day out for dozens and dozens of our customers, right? To go and deliver a workflow, a report, an auditing capability, approval processes, RFIs, like whatever that is, right? As long as we're answering the mail for key stakeholders, utilities, customers, that's really what it's in for us. Like, customer satisfaction is kind of key for all of us. It's what drives us, to continue to innovate. And when we can do it faster, cheaper, reliable, remote, I mean, 85% of our workforce is remote, right? And it is, it's a whole different way of handling a distributed workflow. These are things that we're finding from a technology perspective, not just our water and wastewater customer, but a lot of our critical infrastructure customers are going after now, because we run these, so it's hard to get people in office anymore. It was hard before. Now with COVID, it's even easier not to have people in office, and people don't want to get into an office anymore. And it's changing the kind of the ConOps, if you will, or the common operating picture of these customers, and providing tooling to make it successful and answer those questions in real time. For really important things like having drinking water that's that's healthy and available to all our customers. That's a key to life, right? And we're impacting people's ability to do that in a faster, easier, more efficient way every day.
Right. Yeah, and if we stay on that point about, I guess, innovation and changes in the way people work and technology solutions that are being adopted to help with those changes in the workforce, a pandemic, working remotely. Maybe, Peter, you can talk a little bit about how you've addressed the Great Resignation, the adoption of digital technology, and how you've benefited from that in terms of maybe younger, more technically, savvy people coming on board, and also people working remotely.
Wow. And I got 10 minutes to talk about all that. With the Great Resignation, we've lost, like everybody else, water utilities, a lot of the knowledge reached their 30 years and they're checking out, and it's difficult to find those replacements. And so what we had to do is try to get to work smarter with the fewer staff. I mean, obviously the goal is to replace them as much as we can, and we've done fairly well with finding people who have an interest in the water business and bringing them in at the lower levels to start getting them geared up to be here 5, 10, 15 years, so they can start taking over for the older folks as we step away. But we have to do things with less, and I think having these tools that allows us to keep the work flowing quicker, share the information more readily amongst the team members, whether it's the engineering department and their operations group, that's helped us bridge the gap of having fewer people available. We've also had to rely on some consultants, but then they're struggling the same thing. I mean, they've got people resigning and leaving their businesses as well. So it's kind of shared pain that we're going through. But the tools themselves allow us to at least collaborate and be effective with the communication and getting the decisions made and still moving things forward. I think that answers that question. What else did you want me to talk about?
I think that was good, and maybe
Okay.
maybe just to add on to what you mentioned about your contractors or your consultants, having to deal with the same changes in the workforce. Maybe, Tim, you could talk about what Parsons is doing to address that.
Sure. I mean, I want to also follow on with what Peter was talking about there. Like with respect to not only just having the workflows, it's also it's having the context around all that, right? Like it's such an important fact of the Great Resignation is that the years of experience isn't necessarily that on that experience, right? It's the context to understand what the data means that you're seeing in front of you, right? And so one of the things is, and we've kind of re-instrumented, and this kind of goes to your question a little bit, Bob, is that we're finding ways to integrate multiple data sets together to kind of with machine learning, with different kinds of AI tooling to provide this kind of context, if you will, you're seeing, right? It's not just I've got this working, I'm behind in this status, but what does that look like from a projection standpoint? Are you behind? Hey, in the past, you've had 10 projects that worked like this in the past. Are you behind in your spend, or is this based on past experience, right? These are all things people with a lot of with a lot of exposure in the industry would have intrinsically from their years of service that people don't, right? That new folk have that kind of context. So we're finding a lot of kind of self-education, if you will, or providing tooling to provide kind of that contextual awareness that things aren't the way that things are this way, that really customers really expand, bring people up to speed quicker. And from our standpoint, from the contractor standpoint, I mean, it hits everybody, right? I mean, attrition and just the demand for resources is at unprecedented levels. We have, we do the best we can to hold on to the people we have, and there's put training, for example, giving us enhanced tooling. These are all things that people care about to be more aware of the current capabilities in the field. These are things we all invest in and now just double down on more to try and make sure that we don't have such a negative impact from people who leave, who find better opportunities other places. It will happen, or they have a new passion to go after, or they may choose a complete career change. That's kind of one of the things we found out with younger generation. Hey, I've been a software engineer for 10 years. That's been fantastic. But you know what? I'm going to go do something different, landscape engineering, right? And there's nothing you're going to be able to handle those kind of things. It's a new facet of trying to understand your workforce and being able to adapt to them and provide them opportunities to their interests.
Yeah, all really good points. Okay. Why don't I turn it a little bit back to the infrastructure funding? There's quite a bit of funding available for cybersecurity and physical security. And maybe, Denora, you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the cybersecurity front, and I'll without revealing how you're securing your systems and your plants, a little bit about what you're seeing out there. So, Denora, I'll go and I'll turn it over to Tim and Peter to answer some of that. But let's start with you, Denora. Maybe a couple comments around cybersecurity.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. I got this question last week also. I'm not a cybersecurity analyst or expert on it, right? But we're seeing more and more come up as a topic when we look at AWWA and what their key items that they want to bring up, and have committees dedicated into looking and providing actual specs, right, for what utilities could be using, setting almost like a standard, right? But just an area of study that needs to be looked on, because obviously from a utility standpoint, we're seeing areas that utilities are being impacted by this. Obviously, from a Cityworks perspective, we're always going to be relying on standards for this, industry standards as to, as soon as something comes out, make sure that we're updating to that. But then when we talk about, like, from a funding perspective, there is a cybersecurity like allotment or area for that. But there's also the risk side of it, right? So infrastructure wise, in addition to just cyber attacks, or there's that hardening part, right? And that's when we talk about like vulnerable assets, critical assets that need to be addressed. And at times, I think most of the time utilities have been used to saying, hey, I'm just going to go off of condition, age, material, and that's it. And with the advancements in asset management and just globally, there's been more and more that has been transferred to the US and North America also altogether to say, hey, that there might be a better way to do that. And so being able to leverage tools, obviously we have machine learning, we have remote sensing that we want to look more at performance, but just in a way to do more risk analysis in terms of those, to identify those assets. That is becoming more and more where a lot of organizations, they said, hey, I've done work management for a long time. I'm ready I'm at that maturity step where I'm ready to move on to the next step. And that may be the next step for them.
Great. Maybe, Peter, a little bit from your end on cyber physical security.
Sure. So it's a multifaceted question. I think from my responsibility, the big focus that we've been embarking on from a cybersecurity perspective is the equipment material that we're procuring for our new projects, new facilities, ensuring that these products are what they say they are, manufactured by who they say they were manufactured by, and then there's a level of security and that when we actually implement this piece of equipment or software, isn't compromising organization. So we're working we've done some work on writing our specs. We've done some work with our cybersecurity group with updating those and really looking at what we need to do in terms of site visits and equipment validations before it ships to us, that we accept the material. That's kind of the focus I've been looking at from a cybersecurity perspective for our organization.
Great, thanks, Peter. And Tim, with a minute left, go ahead.
like this is where Peter's saying I could go 10 minutes. That's it. Like I could go for this for 20. Coming from the background, I mean, really what it boils down to is Denora mentioned it, right? It's standards. It's getting the standards all put together. Executive Order 14026, which came after colonial time, right? Everywhere is going to happen. CISA is going to put in rules. We got to help, not only the government figure out how to protect, but only ourselves as well, right? Practices use cyber hygiene, and Parsons has been in the cyberspace for like 40 years in the federal side of the house, and so this is something we're really passionate about following. If you can't figure that out by now with the way I'm talking, but I mean, it really is an important, critical part of a lot of things. Is it the systems? It's the SCADA systems. It's the supply chain security. It's making sure that you have the authenticity of origin and manufacture, the firmware updates. It's so comprehensive. People just struggle to get around it, right? And so we're finding an opportunity there to help kind of do these cyber assessments, risk assessments that we've done, and really kind of get our arms and help our customers get around those problems, because it's a lot. It's a big problem.
Yeah, and I would imagine quite a bit of that too is physical security around plants that I know Parsons is heavily involved in too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. I just wanted to leave you with this note, and I appreciate everybody's time. But we're here to help. There's a lot as we discussed in just 45 minutes or so to navigate through the funding, development of the projects and programs. Trimble and our partners are here to help you. We have the technology solutions. We work with you and our partners like Parsons on projects and programs you develop that would be eligible and qualify for funding, help identify that funding, as well as mentioned earlier too, is provide support in terms of application resources, grant administration, and compliance. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you everyone for attending, and have a great day.